Hello everyone, and welcome to Evidence Mastery. My name is Dr. Massoud Toussi, and it's great to have you with us. Today we're going to dive into something that's absolutely critical in the world of drug safety regulation here in Europe.
So what are we looking at? Well, we're unpacking a really foundational document from the European Medicines Agency. It's called the Guideline on Good Pharmacovigilance Practices. You'll often hear it called GVP. And we're zeroing in on a very specific part, Module 8, Revision 3. Now, this module is all about what we call Post-Authorization Safety Studies.
Okay, but before we jump in, I just have to put up a quick but really important disclaimer. What we're doing here is a summary, a high-level overview. To get the full picture and all the authoritative details, you absolutely have to read the full official guidance document. We really can't stress that enough.
All right, so how are we going to tackle this? We've broken it down into 4 key areas. First up, we'll ask, what exactly is a pass? Then, we'll look at the nitty-gritty of protocols and reporting. After that, we'll figure out who's in charge. You know, the whole oversight process in the EU. And finally, we'll touch on the methods and data sources that make these studies possible. Sound good? Let's get started.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. What is a pass? I mean, think about it. Once a new medicine gets approved and starts being used by thousands or even millions of people, how do we keep an eye on its safety out there in the real world? Well, that's exactly where the Post-Authorization Safety Study, or PASS for short, comes into play.
So if you look at the official directive, a pass is basically any study that happens after a medicine hits the market. Its whole purpose is to identify, characterize, or quantify a safety hazard. But it's not just about looking for problems. A pass can also be used to confirm a drug's safety profile or even to measure how well the risk management measures that are in place are actually working.
Now, this is a really crucial point that the guidance makes. We need to understand the difference between a non-interventional study and an interventional one. This whole module, Module 8, is laser-focused on the non-interventional kind. So what does that mean? It means the doctor prescribes the medicine just like they normally would in their everyday practice, and the study simply observes the outcome. This is totally different from a clinical trial, right? In a trial, a protocol decides which patient gets which treatment, and there are often a bunch of extra tests and monitoring procedures. That's a whole different ballgame, governed by a completely separate set of rules.
So why would you even do a pass? What kind of questions can they help us answer? Well, quite a few actually. They can help us quantify risks. Put a number on how common a certain side effect might be. They're also super important for evaluating risks in specific groups of people, like pregnant women or the elderly, who might not have been well represented in the initial trials. They can look at the effects of using a drug for a very long time, and sometimes their job is actually to provide evidence that a suspected risk isn't really there. And on top of all that, they're vital for just understanding how a drug is being used in the real world.
Okay, so we've got a handle on what a pass is. Now let's get into the how. How are these things actually done? This next part is all about the rulebook, the structures, the processes, and the timelines for both the study protocol and all the reporting that goes with it.
When a regulator imposes a pass, the format for the study protocol isn't just a friendly suggestion, it's mandatory. And for good reason. This structure makes sure every single study is transparent, consistent, and scientifically solid. It all starts with a clear title and abstract. Then comes the rationale, which explains why this study is necessary in the first place. The research question and objectives have to be crystal clear. Then you have the methods section. This is the real blueprint of the study. After that, the data analysis plan lays out exactly how the numbers will be crunched. And finally, the milestones and timelines section maps out the entire project. It's a really rigorous format that's designed to leave no room for guesswork.
And you can't just change things on the fly. A study protocol isn't set in stone, but any changes are very tightly controlled. If you want to make a substantial amendment, we're talking about things like changing the main outcome you're measuring or altering the study population, you have to formally document it, justify it, and get it approved by the competent authority before you implement it. This is so important because it prevents what we call moving the goalposts halfway through a study. It really protects the integrity of the science.
And the clock is always ticking when it comes to reporting. The timeline is super specific. Day 1 is the start of data collection. From that moment, regulators can ask for progress reports anytime they want. Then you have another huge milestone, the end of data collection. This is the day when the very last piece of data you need for your analysis is in and locked. Once that date hits, the company, the marketing authorization holder, has exactly 12 months, not a day more, to submit the complete final study report.
Okay, so we have all these rules and timelines,
But who is actually making sure all of this happens? Who's in charge? This next section is all about the oversight, a sort of who's who in the EU regulatory network. We'll look at who is responsible for what.
First and foremost, the responsibility really lies with the marketing authorization holder, or MAH. That's the company that owns the medicine. They're on the hook for the whole thing, from writing the protocol and running the study to keeping an eye on the data as it comes in, and of course submitting all those reports on time. The buck really does stop with them.
Now, at the EU level, the main scientific watchdog is a group called the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, or PRAC for short. For any big study that's happening in more than one country, the PRAC is the one that assesses the protocol before the study can even start. And they're the ones who review the final report when it's all done. They can either give an endorsement, a green light, or they can issue an objection. And an objection can effectively put a stop to everything until any serious flaws in the study design are fixed.
And then finally, you have the national level bodies. These are the National Competent Authorities, or NCAs. Their job is to oversee any studies that are only being conducted in one single member state. But for those bigger EU-wide studies, they act as the local enforcement arm. They're the ones on the ground responsible for making sure the recommendations and decisions made by the PRAC are actually implemented.
All right, for our last section, let's pop the hood and take a quick look at the scientific engine that drives all of this. What are the common study designs, and what kind of data are we actually talking about here?
One of the real workhorses in this field is the cohort study. You can almost think of it like following two groups of people in a race over time. You start with one group that's taking the medicine, the exposed group, and another group that isn't. Then you just follow them forward in time to see which group develops a particular health outcome more often. It's a really powerful design for measuring risk.
But what if you're studying a really rare disease? A cohort study might take forever. That's where a case control study can be much more efficient. This design basically works backwards. You start with people who already have the condition. We call them the cases. Then you look back into their past to see how many of them were exposed to the drug. And you compare that to a similar group of people who don't have the condition, the controls. It's like being a detective, looking for clues in the past.
So where does all this information come from? Well, just as the name implies, it comes from the real world. We're talking about things like specialized disease registries, the electronic health records from doctors' offices and hospitals, and these massive automated healthcare databases that track millions of prescriptions and insurance claims. And sometimes you still have to go directly to the source, collecting data right from patients using questionnaires or interviews. And that really brings us to the big picture, doesn't it? This whole harmonized framework, all these rules and standards, it's more than just bureaucracy. It's about building a foundation of trust in the evidence we generate from the real world. So it leaves us with a really important question to think about. As these standards get more and more embedded in our daily practice, how are they going to advance the quality and reliability of real-world evidence and ultimately shape better healthcare decisions for all of us?
Well, that's our look at GVP Module 8. Thank you so much for joining us today on Evidence Mastery. I really hope you found this explainer helpful and insightful.
And hey, if you want to go even deeper into these kinds of topics, I'm really excited to let you know that my upcoming book, Real-World Evidence, Methods and Mastery, is planned for release on Amazon in 2027. We'd love to see you again next time, right here on Evidence Mastery.